My name is Derek Fortini. I'm the Estes Park Museum Director. Today is December 6, 2022. I'll be interviewing Wes Kufeld at the Estes Park Museum. So just state your name, your birth date, and where you were born.
My name is Wes Kufeld. I'm 59 years old. October 8th, 1963 is my birth date, and I was born in Phoenix, Arizona.
Nice. You were telling me that some of your ventures with law enforcement were at a very young age. Can you go ahead and just tell me about that and how old you were?
Yeah, you know, what's interesting is when I was a young man in high school, I had really no idea what I was going to do. And so I was looking at different things, different avenues to take. And I had a good friend that was in the Police Explorer program with Fort Collins Police Department. And one day he asked me if I wanted to attend a meeting that was being held that night. So I decided I would attend the meeting. I went to the meeting and met everybody and understood what the program was about, and I immediately got hooked. I decided this is for me. This is apparently in my blood. I want to do this. So I started out with the program, and I was an explorer at 16 years old. It's a volunteer program. It's hosted by, or at the time, it was hosted by the Boy Scouts of America. Since then, it's kind of broke away from that. And it's not so much involved in that because now there's boys and girls. It's a different organization now. So, but I started out as a police explorer, which is a volunteer. You're in full uniform. Obviously you're not carrying a sidearm or anything like that. But the intent of it is to ride with police officers and learn what the career is all about, and learn the different skills and the traits, and then start building on your career. So I was an explorer for a while, and then I decided to promote up through the ranks, and I became sergeant with the explorer post. Then I became lieutenant. Then I became an advisor, and then I went off to college, and then still stayed with it as a senior advisor. I was with the program, I think, about 8 years. But what a great program! I met a lot of friends. I learned all about law enforcement, and I was just hooked. Period. I knew then that this was going to be my career.
Was there anything specific that drew you towards that career?
No, because I really didn't know. Just that evening I went for the meeting, I realized right away that, hey, this is something exciting. This is something different. I want to try this and see if this is what my career is going to be. And I think I went for a couple more meetings, and then that was it. That was my career.
And just to back up a little bit, you said you were born in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
When did you move to Fort Collins?
When I was 2 years old. Okay. My family moved. My dad worked for the Phoenix Division of Wildlife, and then he got a job with Colorado Division of Wildlife in Fort Collins, and so we moved when I was 2 years old.
So before coming to Estes Park, what were the other steps that you were taking to pursue law enforcement?
So knowing that was going to be my path that I need to take, I decided I was going to go to college. So out of high school, I stayed an extra year, and I worked at Mark's Auto Upholstery in Fort Collins, and then went to Ames Community College to attend the criminal justice program there and get my associate's degree. Then I stayed an extra quarter at Ames to get my associate's degree in liberal arts. So then I came out of Ames Community College with 2 associate's degrees, and then immediately went in and put myself through the police academy during the summertime. It was 85 at the police academy.
And was that in Fort Collins?
In Greeley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and then from there, I just decided I would go ahead and go to get my bachelor's degree in criminology with UNC, and a background in sociology. So at the same time I was getting a degree at UNC, I decided I would try to apply for the University of Northern Colorado Police Department, and I got that job. So I worked as a police officer and attended college at the same time, and then finished out my degree. Yeah.
So what When did you move to Estes Park then?
So after I finished the academy, it was December of '87. Let me back up a little bit. The summer of '87, I had an opportunity. I'm going to admit this right now, I'm not much of a football fan. So when the Broncos came to UNC, I left. I had an opportunity to come to Estes Park and become a seasonal community service officer up here. And so a friend of mine and I, Eric Lutz, came up here, and we became CSOs for the summertime and worked that program through. And then in December of '87, that's when Chief Wes called me up when I went back to school to finish my degree, in which I was gonna graduate in December. He called and offered me a job right then on the spot.
And that was here in Estes?
Yes, here in Estes, yeah. And I've been here ever since.
So had you visited Estes Park before?
I had. As a child, our family came up here on vacations or daily trips and that sort of thing, and really enjoyed it. I liked the atmosphere. I liked that tourist type community feel. There was a lot of things going on. We went to Ripley's, believe it or not, and went to different things. I remember there was apparently an Indian chief here in town that would frequent Estes Park, and we always tried to catch him and see him. Never did, but it was always fun to come.
So what made you specifically choose to move to Estes Park? I mean, besides being offered the job, what was
Yeah. So I remember moving to Estes Park in December of '87, and I was able to secure a really cool cabin up by the Dunraven Inn along the river there, and I moved in. I had some friends help me move in, and I just started working. And the more I worked and stayed in Estes Park and went through the field training program at the time, the more I liked it, and the more I decided I want to stay here. And so I just started building on my career similar to what I did with the Explorer program in Fort Collins. And within 3 years, I became a corporal, and then shortly after that, I became a sergeant. And I just started working up the ranks. I was a sergeant for, I think, 13 years, and became a detective sergeant, and then a captain. Well, I was first a commander at the time, and then went to captain, and then put myself through school again to get my master's degree to become the police chief.
And where was that?
That was at the University of, CU Denver is what it was, yeah. And I was working at the same time I was going to school, so I was staying down in the Denver area and going to school and coming back and working. But it was nice. It was a program aimed directly towards advancement into to the upper executive ranks of like captain or even lieutenant, and then police chief. So it was a great program.
So let's focus a little more on your career here in Estes Park. What was it like to be a community service officer for the town in 1987?
You know, at the time we had, I think it was 12 community service officers at the time, and it was a different program. Chief Daversine started in that time period also. He started in '87. And so this was new to him. And Greg Filsinger at the time was in charge of the program, and they developed it in such a way to where it wasn't that you were just working the downtown, the street area. And there was some stigma at the time, or some issue at the time, where it seemed like the downtown area was a concentration camp, so to speak, with the seasonal officers down there and being fully armed. So they decided to soften it up a little bit and put us in a white uniform. So it was the white shirt, blue pants, and a ball cap. And when you work in the downtown area, you're more inviting for the visitors to come talk to you. So in other words, we weren't intimidating in any way. It took away that to being too armed, too many firearms in the downtown area. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So instead, rather, when you worked the downtown area, we did rotations. So we'd do a couple weeks in the downtown area working traffic, and then they would transition you to a full police uniform, and at the time you wore a tan shirt with blue pants, and we were fully armed, and then we rode with the police officers. Because some of us were sworn police officers already, and me coming from the University of Northern Colorado, I already had some background as being a police officer. Then, after you worked the street for a couple weeks with the police officer, then you would work the desk area at the front desk of the police department as well. So it was really nice. It gave you a broad spectrum of tasks as a seasonal officer. So I really enjoyed that.
So I know as chief, you oversaw a lot of our seasonals today that we still have.
Right.
How do you think that program has changed?
We've softened it even more. So what our goal was to get the community more involved in the seasonals. We didn't want them yelling at anybody. We wanted them to be very approachable. We wanted them to have a lot of tools, or a lot of, what am I trying to say? We wanted them armed with a lot of information rather than any sort of weaponry or anything like that, because they're really ambassadors for the visitors, and that's what we wanted. If somebody, maybe lost a wallet or lost a child, or they're wanting to know what time to go to the park or get different directions of going to different places, we wanted them to have that information. And so it's approachable is really what we wanted. So I think it was very successful. The numbers changed based on the year and the budgets cycles and the budgets that were available to us, but I believe it's a very important program for visitor safety, and getting emergency services through the downtown area was critical. So it's worthwhile, and I'm glad to see it's continuing, because it's part of the culture of Estes Park and the police department, and I think there's a lot of value to it.
You were talking about becoming a sworn officer. When did you become a sworn officer? And was it up here then?
I first became a sworn police officer at the University of Northern Colorado. And after working down there for 2.5 years, that's when I came up here, and I was a seasonal. And then in December of '87, that's when I became a sworn police officer up in Estes Park. And being a sworn police officer is you're really sworn with the state of Colorado. It's just that Estes Park employs you, or Fort Collins or Loveland employs you. So it's much like become an electrician, for an example. You become certified with the state of Colorado as an electrician. You become certified in the state of Colorado as a police officer.
So looking at a local level, how would you say, with your experience, how has technology changed the field of law enforcement?
Oh my. When I started out, today I joke about having some back problems, and I go to the chiropractor because one side of my hip's lower than the other, and I think it's because of years of carrying all the heavy equipment that you used to carry at the time. For an example, the radios were much larger at the time and much heavier. We called them the brick. They were old Motorola radios. Now they're slimmer and they're lighter, and everything's just more tailored towards your back. In other words, the officers now are starting to carry load-bearing vests, which I was a little bit hesitant about when I was chief, because I didn't want them to look like a bunch of SWAT officers. I wanted them to still look approachable. But when I saw the data, and I sat through the presentations on the load-bearing vest, to where it's easier on their back and there's less workman's comp claims if they're carrying it on their shoulders and their back rather than their hips, knowing that I've had some hip problems, I thought, okay, that's smart. That's a smart move for our officers. So yeah, we'll do that. So, but a lot of those tools have changed. They're carrying the tasers now, which was never any device that I ever carried. Proven to be a very valuable tool. Things like that. It's just, just like anything else, things change, and you got to keep up with it. The body-worn camera, all officers are carrying that with most police departments throughout the country. There's a lot of value to that. So it's changed a lot.
How about just because I know there's a lot of change, but just some oversight too with how technology has improved dispatch in 911.
Oh, yeah. We've always maintained our own dispatch center. And I remember when I first started, it was at the end of the hallway in the police department. And when it was a very small room, it had these old Motorola radios, and the computers looked very much like a Pac-Man computer, and it had the flashing green light, but it was very important to maintain our own communications, I believe. And I believe that was proven several times with our floods and our fires, where we were cut off from the rest of society in the Front Range, and we had to learn to function and be self-sustainable in the Estes Valley. But at the time we had, I don't know if you remember, well, you weren't here for the fire siren, but the fire siren would go off and it sounded like a tornado siren for the fire department, and you just got used to it. A lot of the visitors that came from the Front Range or in other low-lying areas, Kansas, Nebraska, what have you, where you have tornadoes, when they heard that siren go off in the downtown area, we got a lot of questions, and certainly as a seasonal officer in the downtown area, got a lot of questions. But that's changed now, obviously. The town has 4 trunked 911 lines that will never go away. Those are 4 911 lines that come into Estes Park and took us a while to establish those trunked lines. And it's all part of the sustainability and redundancy in the Estes area. So we have an outstanding dispatch center, and we have some employees all of our employees up there are very well trained. And all of those dispatch centers in the Larimer County Front Range area, there's 5 PSAPs. It's a public safety answering point. There's Fort Collins, Loveland, Larimer County, Estes Park, and CSU, and they're all identical, and they're all funded by 911 dollars, your surcharges on 911 lines or your phone lines. So what I'm trying to get at is all that money that gets filtered through LEDA comes right back to Estes Park, just like it does the other organizations. And our dispatch center is every bit as capable as any of the other dispatch centers around. And I was very proud of that dispatch center as police chief, and the partnership we had with the park and their dispatch center, and how those 2 centers work closely together, and how we would take over their calls after hours in the park. It was very nice. And certainly during an emergency, a disaster, to have our own center was just absolutely critical.
So another thing just to touch base on for changes, because I've seen a lot of different photos, but what about like the vehicles with the police department? How much have those changed?
It's changed a lot. We've gone back and forth. Do we really need 4-wheel drives in Estes Park? We've resided in the fact that yes, in fact we do. We started out with just a couple of 4-wheel drives, but then we were using those 4-wheel drives too much as the more snow we get. But the technology's changed a lot in those too. Certainly the lights are all going to LED now because it's less strenuous on the alternators and the batteries, and now you got computers inside these vehicles, and you have to keep the vehicle running as much as possible, or you have to have another battery bank to keep those, if something happens to the vehicle and it shuts down, you got to keep those computers going, because many police departments or their police officers are dispatched through their computer CAD systems. So if that computer goes down, it's much like you sitting at your own computer having to reboot, and hopefully everything comes back up and get everything set up. You don't want that if your family member needs 911 and you need some assistance. So it's changed a lot. And now they have new sirens they're called a wobbler, and it's designed, you may have heard them, it's designed to actually impact the person. In fact, if you don't hear it, you feel it. You feel it in your chest. It's more of a whoop, 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 whoop. And it's to help people in intersections realize that emergency vehicles coming through. So the radio heads, they call them the radio heads in the cars. It's designed that if in a major disaster in the state of Colorado, you can talk to organizations in Durango, you can talk to other places in, Cheyenne if you need to. So it's got multiple channels and multiple capabilities with the 800 megahertz systems now. It's their mobile office is really what it is. And it's designed to keep them on the street. Because when I was chief, I didn't want them sitting in the office. So we were actually getting rid of a lot of our desktops because they had laptops, they had tough books that they could carry with different docking stations. But I wanted them to be able to get everything they could do accomplished in the car, even print reports and print tickets in the car.
Have there been any large changes to the services provided by the Estes Park Police Department that you witnessed?
I think so, and you're always adapting, depending on what you need. We tried for a while the zone policing, and that was breaking the town up into different zones. We had 7 different zones. We had officers assigned to that zone, and if there was problems in specific neighborhoods, then that officer, your zone officer, could actually come to you to your house, or they could set up a neighborhood meeting, and then you work through those problems. We found that wasn't necessarily working well because we didn't have many officers on the street, and we didn't want folks that actually needed an officer and their zone officer was on vacation, for an example, or not working, or they were sick, or in training, or in court, or that sort of thing. So we kind of decided the whole town's a zone, and as you need a police officer, we'll assign an officer to come to you and work through that problem. One of the ways that we've changed also is through the restorative justice program. It's offering alternatives to sentencing. A good example, if you have young folks that decide they're going to go smash a mailbox, for an example, and they get caught, and the victims want them held accountable. We, instead of writing them a ticket to go to court, and now they have a record, which may have an impact on them getting a job or that sort of thing, we offer them a program that helps them to be held accountable to the community. So then the community can come together, and the victim can come together with that offender and say, here's the impact you had on me as an individual. Now I have to go, I couldn't afford another mailbox, now I have to go buy one. The ground may be frozen, so I can't install it. Now I can't get my mail, or I have to go to the post office to get my mail. And it's to help that individual realize what they did and to repair the harm. So through that program, we've also offered mediation. So if we have family, or we have neighbors or organizations that have some conflict going on and they want some assistance, we had some professional mediators that could step in and help them with that. And then we had parole reintegration programs where people that are on parole can come back into the community. It was an incredible program, from girls' circles to boys' circles, just helping with kids going through these very difficult times, I believe, in school now. And it's just not school, it's society, and it's everything they have to deal with. Things have changed. I mean, it's a lot harder to be a young person than it was when, for example, when you or I were young. They got a lot more to deal with. So we have really tried to expand our services and tried to offer as much as we possibly can with our community. And it was like what I was saying before when we were talking about our officers living in the community. I believe that's the buy-in. If they live in the community, they see what the community needs, they see what programs they may need, and then we can be one with them and partner with our community.
Do you think that that's easier to achieve in Estes Park, not only because of the size of our community, but a lot of people coming into our community kind of already expect that?
I think so. I think it's easier. I've had friends that have been police officers in the Denver metro area, and although they like the excitement and the experiences they have in that that faster pace type areas, they then decide they don't want that anymore. They want to be part of a community. They want they want to take a situation, so an example, a motor vehicle accident. You respond to a motor vehicle accident, you can rather than calling for a motor traffic unit, you can now investigate it yourself. You can take ownership in that. You can help the victim, or you can help the person that was at fault and help them through that whole court process and the insurance issues and the whole thing. So it's being able to start at the beginning and complete each situation rather than pass it off.
Talk about community so much, and I feel like you really developed our police department to really focus on, meeting these basic community needs. And so I was wondering if that's easier to do in Estes Park, not just because of the size, but also because I feel like a lot of people hope to have that when they move to Estes. And so I think our community is more receptive of.
I think so. I think so, and thank you for, I kind of got sidetracked there. But we've hired police officers. For an example, we have an officer now from Baltimore. We have an officer now from Florida. We've had a couple officers from Arizona. And I'm trying to think, we've had some others. And they don't like working in the bigger communities anymore. They want to be part of a smaller community like Estes Park. They want to be known as a community member. So it makes it a lot easier for them to be more effective, and it's more satisfying too as an individual, I believe, if you're part of the community and you see the changes you're making.
If we can just talk about the physical space and the location of the police department.
Sure.
In Town Hall, and obviously lends to some problems. What significant changes have you seen with that space?
We always have joked you can only put so much lipstick on that pig. And we have changed the inside physical space of the police department multiple times. We've had people come in and we've taken down walls, we've built pods, we've taken the pods down, we've built other offices. We've tried to do as much as we can, and as you know, it was the old school, and you can only do so much. But right now, it's a problem, and the town board sees that, the community sees that, and I'm very grateful. In fact, the one regret I have retiring when I did was I really wanted to stay and finish out a new facility. I wanted to be part of that municipal campus that they were talking about and building a new police department. And actually, I was part of the committee that started that, and we obtained all the data, and I feel good about passing that along. But we need a bigger squad room. We're out of space for the evidence room. Our found property spaces are cramped. We need an off-site space. The holding cells are really not up to standard anymore. I mean, they're functionable. They could be much better. The hallways are cramped. The tile looks bad. The paint looks bad. Those things you can change, but why do that if there's the hopes and desires to build a new facility eventually? But it's time. And the reality too, and the town has seen it, that does it make sense to have a police department in the core downtown area? Should that be left up to the merchants in the downtown area for retail space and move that to a better location where we can expand? So I miss that, and someday I look forward to watching that building come up, and I'm going to be here for the grand opening.
What do you believe were the largest changes in the community while you were here with the Estes Park Police Department?
Oh, the major changes. I think it depended on what fires that we had going on, or any floods, major disasters, or anything like that. But I believe that Estes Park, it's changed. Just like any community, you can't help it. The Front Range is growing. There's a lot more traffic. There's a lot more people coming up. I think when I started, there was 1.5, maybe 2 million people that would come to the Estes area. Now we're pushing 5 million, no problem at all. And it's just busy. And And so our traffic patterns have got to change, our light sequences need to change, our pedestrian safety thoughts need to change. We got to keep up with that. Bottom line, years ago, the town was really horse and buggy, and nobody knew that it was going to be all this traffic. And so we've been forced to change, and we got to figure all that out. So, but I think it's changed in a very good way, and it still remained a small community, which I liked, and that's why I lived here so many years. I cherish that, and my kids grew up here, and that's why I wanted to raise my kids here, is because it is still a small community, and in a lot of ways it's still protected from some of the fast pace in the Front Range.
So you brought up the flood and the fires.
Mm-hmm.
If I can go ahead and ask you a couple questions about
Sure.
both those events. Let's start with the flood. How did the 2013 flood impact you personally, and then we'll get into kind of what your responsibilities were professionally?
Well, I think what was surprising to everybody is the 3 or 4 days of rain that just did not stop. And all of a sudden it got to the point where the ground was just saturated and couldn't take any more water. And our rivers couldn't take any more flow coming through because they're just only so big. Luckily and fortunately they have changed now, and we've got a better idea of some of that drainage. But I think the amazement of is this really happening to Estes Park? Is all this water really coming downtown? And what's happening, and how are we gonna save the community from totally flooding out? We worked constantly. As a police officer, you should never plan on going to work, working 8 to 5, because something is always going to happen, and you're always expected to work a lot more hours. It's just the way it is, and it's the emergency services you got into, and if you don't like it, then maybe you weren't really, meant to be in that. But I was there constantly for the community members. I was there on different committees. We worked through it. We brought in partners from the Front Range. We had partners from the National Park Service. You had communications to worry about, which is the phone lines that were going down. We had the cell lines that were going down, hardwire lines. We had 800 megahertz going down, 911 trunk lines. We were concerned about that. There was a point in time where we lost everything, and we found ourselves realizing that 34 is shut off. It's the part of the canyon was destroyed. 36 was shut off. We had people stranded in different areas of those canyons, and then Highway 43 down in Glen Haven shut off. It was terrible. And then to top it off, Highway 7 caved in a couple different areas, and now we're by ourselves. So were we ready for that? I believe we did a fantastic job as a government entity getting the town through that horrible time. And what's really amazing is how the community members step up. What's very cool is there's no crime during I'm gonna knock on wood if I can, but there's no crime that's going on because people realize that the whole community is one through this situation, and we need to just get through this situation. Everybody comes together. Neighbors that maybe didn't necessarily get along so well now are getting along because they're trying to help each other. It's just very cool. It really is, and I'm glad we got through it, and I hope it never happens again. But I'm gonna guess it maybe will someday. But we learned a lot, and it was quite an experience.
How about your experience with the 2020 fires? Do you have some things you want to say about that?
Yeah, you're talking about the troublesome fire. And so when the Cameron Peak fire started, obviously everybody was very concerned about that and the impacts that had on Glen Haven. And we were watching very closely how it could possibly come through the park and connect to then the troublesome fire started, and those two fires merging. We didn't believe that they would, and finally they did. And we never thought that the troublesome fire would spark and come over the divide, which it did. And there was times where our staff were working 24/7. Some of the officers were on their own. They wanted to be there. They wanted to work different posts and help out as much as possible. We had our emergency operations center set up at the fairgrounds. We're working very well with our partners from all aspects, law enforcement and emergency services. There was a point in time I'll never forget, and I was just talking with somebody about this the other day, that we were at the fairgrounds, and we were in there, and we had all of our computers and our screens set up, and we had everybody there, and we realized that it's very possible that the troublesome fire was going to come into town on the west side of town and burn right through town, and we were worried where we needed to go. So we had evacuated town. It took us 4 hours to evacuate the whole town of Estes Park. We're both highways on the way out of town, so 34 or 36 and 34, both lanes were taken up eastbound only to get people out of town. And it's still 4 hours may seem like a very short time, but when you're in the heat of things, that seemed like it was taking forever to get people out of town. But so there we were at the fairgrounds. We're in a metal building, and I remember Benny Barnes looked at me and said, "That fire is going to come right by us. What are we going to do?" I said, "We're going to hunker down, and we're going to let that fire burn right around us because we have a job to do, and that is to protect Estes Park." And she said, "Really? We're going to let it burn around us?" I'll never forget it. And I said, "Yeah, we are. And we should be fine." And she said, "We should be fine?" Well, no, we'll be fine. So luckily, it didn't come into the downtown area, but we got everybody out of town. We had some folks that decided to stay. We were very fortunate that that fire didn't come through town. We've learned some lessons on the Marshall fire in the Front Range, how fast a fire could move. So we learned a lot, and we, you can always learn from a disaster. If you go through a disaster and there's no problems, then you didn't really go through a disaster. There's always going to be very organized chaos is really what it's going to be. So we learned how to get better with the park, get better with the county, get better with a lot of our other partners, and the fire district learned a lot. All of us as emergency providers learned how to handle this fire better next time. And that's what it's all about.
So Wes, do you have any stories or comments to share about being police chief for the only evacuation ever taking place here in the history of Estes Park during the fire?
Yeah, in all my years of law enforcement here and being the chief, I was the chief for 14 years, I never thought that we would have to evacuate the whole town of Estes Park. I mean, you go through these scenarios and these trainings that you always want to be prepared for what if we have something like that happen. You never really dream that it actually is going to happen. So that morning when we realized that troublesome fire has sparked, it has come over the divide, and it is settling down into one of the canyons, and it could burn into Estes Park depending on the winds and that sort of thing, we realized that we could be looking at a full evacuation of the town of Estes Park. I mean, we were trying to look at different phases, if here's the trigger points, we evacuate this side of town. Here's another trigger point, it's gotten the fire, it's gotten to the point of over here, so now let's evacuate this side of town. We never thought that we would do the whole town at the same time. But what was really cool about that is when you have people that are in the midst of a disaster, all your training comes up, and everything that you've practiced and you've thought about in your career now becomes like part of the game plan. You know, it's like a football team. You practice all these plays, and now when it's time for the moment, you realize, here's my job, here's what I got to do. So what was amazing to me as the chief is watching all these people that I've put into play. For an example, our emergency manager and the county's emergency manager, and everybody's getting together, and now they know exactly what they're supposed to do. And they started coordinating, and they started getting the captains involved, and the sergeants. Captains got the sergeants involved, and they put together these teams, and they had the flagging, and they cordoned the town off, and they knew that this team is going to go to Carriage Hills, for an example. This team's going up Fall River. This team's going, up by Mary's Lake, and they just started evacuating town, and it was so impressive to watch it happen. So as the chief, sitting back and watching this happen, and I remember talking with the sheriff, Justin Smith, you're just in amazement that your people are so good at what they do, and it's not necessarily because of what you've done, it's because of the training that they've gone through, and they just know their jobs. So you feel good that all your folks are doing everything they're supposed to be doing, and because of that, they saved the community. So it's not me saving the community or any one person. I couldn't do it without them. But I sat back as the chief, and I couldn't have been more proud watching them pick up their roles and just make things happen.
So just to change gears here a little bit, in the past few years, there's been changing public sentiments about police in general. How did you handle those national sentiments at a local level in our community?
That's a shame that those things have happened in our country, and it's a shame that it's going to continue to happen. And unfortunately, and I've always said, there are bad police officers in our country. There is, and that's just a shame. And it's too bad that they're employed. I get very passionate about those type of police officers because I don't think there's any room for that type of behavior in law enforcement. And it's a shame that they've been allowed to continue. And that's why I've spent so much time, and we're so careful in our recruiting, in our selection of our police officers. And I don't want any of that. And there are transient police officers out there, and they've applied for jobs here in Estes Park, and I just absolutely will not hire them. And I made it clear to our city managers at the time that I'll take as many applications as come in, and I'll screen them. But if I find out that they come to me with any sort of baggage that's going to bring some negativity or any sort of opportunity for us to be on the front page of the newspaper or in the media because of their bad beliefs, then I'm not going to hire them. And I'll scrap the entire list of candidates and start all over again. And I've always said, I don't care what it costs. I realize it's going to cost the town money and manpower and that sort of thing, but it's worth it so we don't employ the wrong person that's going to get the town of Estes Park sued. So as we went through all this situation that happened nationally, and we felt it, we felt the pressure, we felt the cameras coming out. All of a sudden there's more people with cell phones holding their cell phones up on traffic stops, or even when you're visiting with somebody in the downtown area. Everybody in the nation was trying to catch that footage that they could sell to the media. We weren't going to provide that footage. We weren't going to give them the satisfaction of discriminating against people in any form, in any shape whatsoever, because we have good police officers that if we hired the right people, they're not going to do that anyway. So I was confident, is what I'm getting at. I felt very confident that we're going to go through this just fine because we don't have police officers that come with that mindset that we tried to protect ourselves so much about. But also, we have a community that believes in the police department. They trust us. They believe in us. We've built those partnerships with them that we just sheltered ourselves from that. And I feel like, it's still there. It's not going to go away. There's always going to be people that are discriminatory against other people. It's never going to go away in our nation. But I believe that if you hire the right people and you get the right mindset in there and you get community members that believe in you and trust in you, I believe you can make it through those tough situations.
Can you tell me briefly how COVID-19 impacted police service?
Yeah, COVID-19 was tough. Police officers don't get the opportunity to go home and shelter at home, so to speak, from COVID-19. Crime is always going to happen. Emergencies are always going to happen. We were out there to assist our firefighters. We're out there to assist our EMS folks, and they're still going to calls. Our officers are still responding to motor vehicle accidents. They're still responding to alarms. Domestics still happen. Those unfortunate situations, crime-wise, are always going to happen. So having said that, our officers don't have a choice. We've told them, do everything you can to protect yourselves. Wear masks, use hand sanitizer, do everything you can to not be exposed to COVID-19. But it's tough. We're throwing them out there. We're saying, look, and they actually knew that they were going to calls with people that are suffering from COVID-19. They still went, and we were very fortunate, and hopefully they got vaccinated and doing the right things to protect themselves, because we certainly don't want them then to catch COVID-19 and then take it home to their families. So it's hard, it's hard. And to tell them, maybe don't pull over every car for a license plate out or a tail light out. Maybe refrain from that sort of thing, and stick to your speeders and those type of more serious traffic offenses. So that's a tough time, that we all went through, and I'm glad. It was a lot of stress for everybody just getting through that.
Were there any times that COVID did sweep through PD or anything like that?
Oh yeah, there's times when there'd be 3 or 4 people that were exposed to COVID-19 and got sick, and we'd send them home, and then we'd be shorthanded. There was times I was out there taking calls as well. It's just to be expected. So you just did what you could and tried to, if we had the whole police department go down, that's not good. That's, what do you do then? So it's tough. It really is.
What's the number one thing you were most proud of to accomplish as police chief?
I think we tried really hard to retain our police officers in the Estes Park area. There was a point in time there where all the Front Range areas, so Fort Collins, Loveland, Lerma County, Greeley, Longmont, all of those organizations were paying their police officers higher wages. And it was hard to keep our police officers in the Estes Valley because their cost of living's higher up here, and it's hard to find housing, and even more so now. And so, and they have a right to better themselves and to become, financially stable. And so they were leaving the Estes Valley to go and work in other organizations. The frustrating part of that is we train just like all the other organizations do. We have state mandates that we have to maintain through POST, which is the Colorado Police Officer Standards. And so our police officers are every bit as qualified as their police officers, but we just couldn't keep them because we couldn't pay them as much because we don't have the revenues that all of those bigger municipalities might have. So at the time, Frank Lancaster was the city manager, and he and I got together and we decided we gotta fix this. And Jackie Williamson was there as well. And we decided the only way to fix this is to go to our town board and try to get an increase in pay for our police officers to keep them here. And because when we lost a police officer, I calculated up one time that the community really lost $100,000. So to train a police officer, to outfit them with all the gear and all the uniforms, which are incredibly expensive, and to train them for 1 year was $100,000 lost to the community. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money going out the door, going to another organization if we can't hang on to them. So how do we retain those police officers? And that's when we decided, well, the town board agreed to a 15% increase, which was an amazing step. I think Bill Pinkham was the mayor at the time and led us through that. And then with that also, we decided if we locked down the residency rule, so it was 30 minutes for them. They had to stay within the Estes community, within the school district boundary. And on top of that, we would give them a police car, which is, we talked about before, that's their mobile office. They have everything all set up. That way they could keep all their gear in there. And they could respond immediately from their home rather than come from the police department and gather all their equipment and fire up their computers and that sort of thing. So now they could respond from home. So really it helped them in that respect as well. So it's called a one-on-one take-home car program. And it's consistent with what Fort Collins, Loveland, Larimer County does as well. And it's basically like a force multiplier where you give them the tools they need to respond directly to the emergency rather than coming to the PD. So it's like a benefit. So all of those things compiled, we're able to maintain the current force that we have. We weren't losing those folks to the Front Range. Now they're staying. Now they're being more bought into the community. We found that they were buying homes here because now they could afford them a little bit better. And they were more stable. So I'm very proud of that. And I hope that doesn't change. I hope the town maintains the force that they have, and the police officers are community members too, and so are the dispatchers. All of the employees that work at the police department are critical in my mind. And we need them to stay here, and we need them to understand the community and be aware of the different, well, I'll give you an example. So, and Estelle Purvis, she probably won't like me mentioning her name, but Estelle Purvis, I have worked with her. She's a dispatcher. I have worked with her for over 30 some years. The best dispatcher I've ever worked with. She's absolutely outstanding. She had an emergency call one time where it was up in the national park, and the caller was trying to explain to her where they were at. Because she has spent so much time in the national park and she's been here, she knew precisely where that person was and where she needs to send the EMS because she was familiar with that rock or this corner or this tree and was able to get help there. That's what I always tried to maintain in our police officers and our dispatchers, because we want them to be part of the community. We want them to know exactly when somebody says it's by this rock in this creek down in the bottom. They know exactly. I know where that's at, and they can send help to that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So my most proud moment, I think, is being able to maintain those police officers here so we can continue to function on a higher level and build those partnerships and get the community the help that they need.
Were there any minor but still important things that you did as police chief that you'd like to highlight?
It was everything I did I felt was important, from helping out the officers or dispatchers or any of the employees that were employed by the police department, just helping them in any way to do their job the best that they could do. My job as police chief was obviously to maintain the budget, maintain all the policies, get all the support they can, and to do their job, and then maintain all the outside entity type of partnerships and that sort of thing. I really liked my job because it was multifaceted, and I was doing a lot of different things. And I could also, when I heard something happening on the street, I could get out of my desk, go jump in my car, and be there to help them actually on the street. It was hard to get the police officer out of me, and I couldn't just sit at a desk. So that's what I liked about it.
And you may have mentioned it, but when exactly did you retire?
May 6th. Retired May 6th.
Of 2022?
Of 2022, yep.
So, an open-ended kind of question. What would be your hopes and dreams for the future of the Estes Park Police Department?
I hope that they continue operating on that high level. I hope that they maintain those partnerships. I hope that they do actually build that new police facility and just keep expanding. I'm really proud of everybody, and when I left the police department, I felt really good. I was leaving it in a really good place, and I hope it just continues, and the community keeps supporting our police department, and our police department keeps supporting the community, and just keeps functioning. I feel like they're all one, and the friendships that I've built and the direction I see everybody going individually in the police department, I hope that continues. Our town board has always supported our police department. Our town management from the top down has always supported the police department. I hope that continues too, and everything just keeps going well.
What other organizations and nonprofits did you personally serve on while you were here in Estes Park?
I was on the Rotary for quite a few years. I have been involved with the Lair Emergency Telephone Authority, LETA, for many years. I was the board chair for 7 years. In fact, today, after this interview, I'm meeting with the board director just to catch up. I also was part of the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police for the entire time I was a chief, and then I was a professional standards assessor with the Chiefs Association. So what that meant was I would travel around the state. I would gather the policies from different organizations, and there was 177 state standards that these agencies had to adhere to. My job was to match their policies to the standards and make sure that their policies are in line with the standards and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I would actually physically go to the police department, and I would look through all of their, from cars to evidence rooms to dispatch centers, administration and everything, and basically make sure that they're in line to be accredited. So it was fun. There was a lot of different directions you could go as a police chief, and different places or different organizations you could be part of.
I think our community really recognizes the Blue Santa program that the police department does. Can you just tell me a little more about that?
Blue Santa, it started, I'm trying to think now. It's been going on for close to over 30 years. Blue Santa was a program that was designed to take care of our community members that things like Toys for Tots or any of those already established programs don't necessarily capture. So we decided that we have a lot of elderly folks here in the community that maybe are what we consider shut-ins, or maybe folks that can't get out and can't shop or can't purchase food items for themselves or anything like that for the holiday season. So we decided that our volunteer unit at the time, now is our auxiliary unit, would spearhead this and continue to collect food items and maybe, letterhead or toiletry items or any blankets or clothing or anything that would help them out. And then we would actually put together these delivery boxes that were just packed full of items that we would then, usually about December 15th or so, we would go and physically deliver those to these folks. And without that, it's an amazing program, and I know they just had that, and I actually missed going to that. I would have liked to have done the deliveries. Very satisfying, very helpful for the community.
You brought up auxiliary. I'm curious, having an auxiliary unit, is that common for most police departments?
Yes and no. It depends on the community involvement, depends on the organization. We have always wanted to get our folks involved in the police department, and we talked about partnerships several times. Our partners are our community members, and if they can be part of the police department, even whether they're front desk volunteers, we've had numerous front desk volunteers, or we had one gentleman that was a sworn reserve member, and then we've had up to 20 volunteers, or that is now called the auxiliary, where they ride. They ride with the officers. They assist with special events. They assist with like the bike rodeo or the safety fair. They do fingerprinting. They are actually, that's one of the. You asked what I'm proud of. That unit, I'm proud of them, and those individuals, I'm proud of them. There are some that were there every single day, and still today they are. They're very helpful, and they do it for free. And they do it because they love their police department, they love their community, and that's why they're involved. And we love them. I mean, it's just all part of the PD family.
So are there other individuals you'd like to mention, either personally or professionally, or if you'd like to get into partnerships and community?
There are so many individuals that over my 35 years being in Estes Park and working with so many people, I would do them an injustice if I forgot them. And so what I'd like to say is I just want to thank everybody that was part of the community and part of the police department, helped out, partnered with me, partnered with all of us, and was actively involved in public safety in the Estes Valley. I mean, it's I think back about it, and I'm so proud of so many people. And for my family to tolerate some of the things that they had to tolerate, me not being there at Christmas or having to leave during Thanksgiving dinner and missing plays or missing dances and missing all those things, and to deal with, it's not easy being a father going as a police officer, and certainly as a police chief, or even a husband. My family's just been outstanding. But all the partnerships from the other emergency services, and the police chiefs and the sheriffs and the fire chiefs and the EMS directors and everybody, it's hard for me to sit here and just name one or two individuals. I just want to thank everybody for everything they did. And if you stepped up in the community, I needed you, and I'm glad you're there, and I couldn't have done it without you. So I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you for your time today. I think we are extremely lucky to have you in our community and to be such a strong leader for our police department as well.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.